Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alpheus Loukas Ascan, a first-year college student from taking BS DevCom from the College of Development Communication here in UP Los Baños, and today we are here with Dr. Javis Joshua Flores, an environmental scientist and consultant, to discuss about the topic of permaculture as a sustainable agricultural method. So, Dr. Javis,
Hello.
hello po. Thank you for accepting this time to interview for today.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. And so to start things off, Dr. Javis, would you kindly introduce yourself, your field of work, and the current projects you are working on?
Okay, so hi, my name is Javis Flores. I'm currently a senior lecturer for UPOU University. I teach subjects such as landscape ecology and subjects in sustainability in the Doctor in Sustainability program. And also I teach landscape ecology in the Master of Environment and Natural Resources Management program. I'm also the consultant for the FMDS Permaculture Garden where we are right now. And I'm also a full-time environmental consultant and drone pilot. So currently my projects are the FMDS Perma Garden, and I do other consultancy projects for NGO, social enterprises, mostly mapping projects and mapping and monitoring of landscapes.
To start, Dr. Javis, can you briefly explain what?
Okay.
Can you briefly explain what permaculture is and how it differs from other perspectives in agriculture?
Okay, so permaculture is really not a technique in itself or a type of agriculture, but it's a design system, or others call it a design philosophy. It's a way you design things. It came from the words permanent and agriculture, and then it eventually evolved into permanent and culture, because the design principles is not just applicable in farms or gardens, but in everyday life, organizing communities, designing houses. So it's not just about farms and gardens. So it eventually became permanent culture, which if you translate it in today's terms, it means sustainable culture. So what's the difference with other alternative agriculture or sustainable agriculture methods is that you can actually apply permaculture if you're already practicing other sustainable agri methods. For example, natural farming, organic agriculture. You can do your permaculture design in those types of farming, because permaculture is basically sustainable design and working with nature. So you work with available resources. For example, you have a forest here, so you think of ways how to integrate your farm or your garden or your project into that forest. So permaculture is basically a design system of how you can live sustainably.
So thank you for that explanation. So basically, permaculture is a design system, and it is not a specific type of agriculture.
Yes.
Meaning it can be applied in basically any form of agriculture, as you just mentioned. So next question, what inspired you to specialize in permaculture, and how long have you been practicing it?
Okay, in 2012, I learned about organic agriculture here in UPOU, and one of my classmates there told me about permaculture, and then he showed me a video, and when I watched it, I said, wow, many people must have been practicing permaculture already, because it made sense. It's a design system, it's a design philosophy. And then when I decided to study further permaculture, I was taking my master's here at that time in environment and natural resources. And I told myself, I want to learn more about permaculture, and it's aligned with environmental management. And then when I started searching for literature, I was surprised that there is a lack of scientific literature on permaculture, even though permaculture started in the 1970s. So I was surprised. So I told myself, maybe I can start researching on this topic here in the Philippines. So our literature, our scientific literature on permaculture would grow. Now, I started formal research on permaculture for my SP in 2015, so it's already 9 years we've been studying permaculture here in the Philippines.
So it's been almost a whole decade
Yeah.
that you've been studying permaculture, and I've actually seen one of your research papers while, you know, researching for this particular news story that I've been working on. Next question: what are the core principles of permaculture?
Permaculture is founded on 3 main ethics, which is care for the earth, care for people, and fair share. Now, in terms of principles, different authors have different sets of principles. So currently, we're following David Holmgren's 12 design principles of permaculture. And also here in UPOU, we teach permaculture also. So we have another set of principles there. So basically, I will tell you about some favorite principles I have. So for example, principle 1, it's observe and interact. I think that's the most important principle in design, because using that design principle, you get to spend time with nature, and you just observe, make observations, record data, and then just really be one with nature while prior to the design, because it's not like you just design on paper and then you implement it. You really have to spend time here. So when we started this garden, this has nothing in it. So this was just grass. Okay, so one of the due to our observation and interacting with the place, we found out that when it rains, certain areas of this land fills up with water. So I said, instead of being a problem, that is actually the key for us, because we know that this landscape catches water, and for plants to grow, the land needs to catch water. So we integrated that flow into the design, and we actually exaggerated that flow. So where the water fills up, we dug it even deeper and turned it into a pond. So that's why there's a pond there on that side. So
Right there.
Yeah, right there. Because that's natural. So we just dug it deeper so it will look more like a pond. So that was our first step. The second one is integrate rather than segregate. That's another principle that I like. It means that instead of compartmentalizing each section, everything is well integrated. If you notice farms or gardens, you usually see very clear rows of crops. But when you see a permaculture farm like this, everything is like, it's like a forest. And then what people don't realize, when we were designing this garden, this is actually connected to Mount Makiling, because there's a long stretch of trees, which we call a tree corridor or wildlife corridor, that connects to the mountain. So we're trying to take advantage of that natural feature and introduce biodiversity here in the garden.
Wow, that's very interesting. I never actually knew that until now. So thank you for
Yes.
mentioning that. So there isn't any like fixed
Yeah.
like meaning or definition for what the principles of permaculture should be.
Yeah, because it depends on the author. So the original proponent, actually there are co-proponents, co-originators, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. They're like a student and teacher. So Bill Mollison had his manuscript, the original one, Permaculture Designer's Manual. He has this set of principles there. And the student, David Holmgren, he published his own book years after. So it's a more accessible book. The language is written in the language of the masses, so it's more easier to follow. So currently, the 12 principles of Holmgren is more popular. So that's what we're trying to teach also.
Thank you.
Yes.
So next question, what are some of the design principles in permaculture and its impact to agriculture?
Yeah. Some design that its impact on agriculture. Okay, so
So we already talked about the core principles
The
of,
core,
of permaculture. Now we're talking about the design.
Design, yeah.
principles.
Actually, the three ethics, that's the core foundation. The ethics is different from the principles. Yeah, the ethics is actually the foundation for the design. Now, all of those principles are applicable to agriculture, but there are some specific principles that, let's say, makes more sense in agriculture. So one of my favorites also is use and value diversity. So that's I think the core design principle here in this garden, because it's not just diversity of crops, it's also diversity of animal species, bird species, insects. So we wanted to make this place as diverse as possible, because the more diverse an area is, the more stable it is to disruptions or hazards or disasters. So you can see from here that we have more than 2 to 3 crops per unit area. So here our rule is, I think, 4 to 5 crops in a 2 by 2 square meter plot. So this is like what do you call this, a salad bowl or a salad garden. And it's not just annual crops or the vegetables that you just harvest and it's gone, but what we call here is perennial crops, where you harvest once and you can harvest all year, like this papaya over here. So that's called the perennial crop. So yeah, you can see this landscape is very diverse. So use and value diversity, that is one principle that our agricultural system should adopt, because currently our system adopts monoculture. It means one crop in a large area.
So basically what permaculture should be is like multiple crops in like a single particular area, and not unlike most commercialized farms where it's just where they usually just prioritize one crop in like and use up a large amount of land and resources just to cultivate that. Whereas here in permaculture, like as you said, you have multiple crops here that you can harvest all year, and whilst not compromising the biodiversity in this garden.
Exactly.
So next question, can you share some examples of successful permaculture projects you've been involved in?
Okay. So during my dissertation in my PhD, I've been to 12 permaculture projects. They're not all farms or gardens. Some are initiatives. So where I studied permaculture in Cabiao, Nueva Ecija, it's called Cabiocid Foundation Inc. So Cabiocid means Ka is Cabiao, the place, Bio is life, and Kid is Bukid. So Cabiocid. So they're one of the more popular permaculture schools here in the Philippines. So we took our course there in 2014. They're still existing. They're situated in a rice field, but from Google Maps or Google Earth, you will see that Cabiocid is really different from the rest of the landscape, because it's like a forest in the middle of the rice field. But they still grow rice, but the rice is in the middle of the forest. So it's a good example of what large-scale permaculture is. So that's one. Other examples are, so there in Tayabas, Quezon, we have Habilin Farms. The designer there is a graduate here in UPOU, but I have yet to visit them. And then we have a map actually of permaculture practice in the Philippines. You can find it in Google Maps, or you can Google it, just type permaculture map of the Philippines, and then you can just add your entry there if you have a permaculture project. So unfortunately, not every permaculture site I've been to has been successful. So some of them closed down during the pandemic. Some have shifted priorities, but they are still a permaculture site, but some of them already closed. So I'm not sure if they're still gonna open in the future. But that's 2018, so fast forward 6 years, I think there are more farms and projects right now, and hopefully the permaculture course here in UPOU can help in popularizing or mainstreaming permaculture, not just for hobbyists, but also for full-time farmers as well.
Okay, so you said that there's a public repository about all the permaculture projects here in the Philippines. Is there any way to verify if they're actually permaculture projects, or are some just not using it for like marketing purposes or just for promotion purposes?
Yeah, so that's the problem with open source repositories like that, is you cannot really verify if they have inputted accurate information or photos, so you really have to go there to verify. So we're encouraging students, researchers to visit these sites in the permaculture map and actually see what they are doing, and if what they are doing is actually permaculture. So we have a lot of sites to study, because we need to monitor and keep track if these sites are actually practicing the design principles or actually beneficial to the environment. So we still do not know.
All right. Next question. Is it possible for someone with limited space to implement permaculture practices?
Yes. Actually, the Perma Garden here in UPOU is a demonstration of permaculture at different scales. So for example, this is a small circle here. This is permaculture at a small scale. Okay, so they're practicing intercropping, multiple crops, and very diverse. This is like a small food forest. So you can practice permaculture here. So we actually did this adopt a plot project to show people that they can practice permaculture in different scales, different sizes. So they can adopt their own technologies, for example, this one, this one, this one. So there are a lot of examples. For example, this one, that's also permaculture. It's called the mandala garden. So it's a mandala style garden. And then we have this, the lifestyle garden. So it's different shapes, different sizes, different crops. So whenever people ask us, can you practice permaculture on a small scale, we show them our projects here.
So the perma garden is like a microcosm of the different like demonstrations or different types of what permaculture can be, even with just limited space.
Yes.
So next question. In what ways can permaculture promote sustainability for small-scale farmers?
Okay, so permaculture is really closely related to sustainability and the sustainable development goals, and actually the 3 pillars of sustainability. So you can actually integrate permaculture design principles in all of your sustainability projects. Actually, permaculture can be a framework for your sustainability plans. So for example, here, the main SDG that we're addressing here is SDG 2, which is end hunger. Okay, so end hunger, because this was created for the UPOU faculty and staff and community. So we wanted our community to be healthy and the food to be accessible to them, because we cannot help others if we cannot help ourselves. And I think based on our dean's initiative, this is her initiative, this was actually inspired by the pandemic, because when our food sources are cut, we become vulnerable. Okay, so sometimes we can't depend on farms outside of our province for food supply. So if disasters strike, pandemic strike, at least we have this like community garden where we can get all our favorite food. So it's not just vegetables and fruits, but we're expanding like the chickens also. So who knows what will this perma garden be like in a few years, and hopefully it will really sustain the whole UPOU community.
So next question, what are some of the usual challenges faced when implementing permaculture practices?
Very good question. There are a lot of challenges because permaculture is not a project that you just leave alone. Okay, so sometimes people think that you learn permaculture, get someone to do it, and you just stay disconnected. A permaculture project is very personal. You have to be close to it. You have to spend time with it. So it's getting people back to the soil or back to nature. You cannot be just passive about it. So eventually it will come to a point where it looks like and it feels like it's self-sustaining, because right now a lot of our crops here are mature already, so it has like the characteristics of a forest. So you can leave this for a week and nothing bad will happen. But during the early stages, you really have to be there planning, because it's not a static design, a design that you just draw and implement. It's a dynamic design. So one challenge here is, what if nature itself or nature herself gives design inputs into your garden? So by inputs, it means if a typhoon comes, it will knock down trees, for example. So it's not really a disruptive activity. That's actually nature designing with us. Okay, so if you see trees knocked over, you design around that. You respond. So one of the principles of permaculture is creatively use and respond to change. Okay, so every permaculture design is dynamic. So that's why you have to have a close relationship with your projects or designs. So that's a major challenge, because some people are disconnected with their projects, and then they let other people do their projects. So you have to be involved. Yeah.
So basically, permaculture is no easy task.
Yeah.
And it's not. It looks simple when in actuality it really takes a lot. It's really a complex task to
They
do.
call it knowledge intensive.
Mhm. And you mentioned something about nature and how nature acts as an input to permaculture. It's like instead of working on your project against nature, you work with nature and you make plans to adapt to what nature, I guess, wants.
Yes, exactly.
And lastly, as we wrap things up here, what advice would you give to someone who would like to employ permaculture?
Okay, my advice is spend time with nature. Go back to the soil. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Trial and error in your experiments. Do your own research. And just because you did not finish agriculture in school doesn't mean that you can't design your own food systems or design your own garden or your own farm. So that's my advice. No? So just spend time with nature, observe, look at the interactions between the components, the birds, the plants. Personally, I'm a birder. I'm a watcher. It's one of my hobbies. So when I go to a garden like this, I try to find out what the birds are eating. Okay, so I spend my time observing them, their behavior, the food that they like, because when I find out about those things, you know what to plant in your garden. So for me, that's one of my indicators of a successful design, when birds are starting to come in. So there, just spend time with nature.
So, and anyone, regardless of where they come from, what their background is, whether they practice agriculture or not, anyone can practice permaculture.
Yes.
In their own way.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, po,
Thank you.
Dr. Jabez, and that was a very insightful and interesting interview, and I definitely learned a lot about permaculture, and honestly it's making me want to practice permaculture in some form in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.